Right, Rebecca, welcome to the Departure Board. Let's start off by you telling us your story and where you are now and how you got there.
So I am from Leicester. I was born and raised in the UK to a Taiwanese mother, but I never came to Taiwan at all when I was younger. So I spent all my formative years in Leicester, then moved to Brighton. I went to Sussex University to study international development. And I think my interest in that comes from having an intrinsically multicultural upbringing. As you might know, Leicester's one of the most diverse cities we are blessed to have in the UK. And actually, the first time I came to Taiwan, I was 19 years old, so I was quite late in my journey. And after visiting the first time, it was kind of my undying pursuit to come back as soon as humanly possible, which I honored during my study abroad year. And since graduating, I also have returned to study Mandarin. That's in a nutshell, that's my life.
Right. So that 19-year-old trip, what was that like then? And how did that come about? How long did you go for? What did you do? And why was it so transformative, I guess?
So that time I went with my sisters, and my mum actually still hasn't come back to Taiwan for nearly 30 years.
Wow.
And when I came that time, it was also the first time that I met any of my Taiwanese family. So my amma, my grandma. It's the first time I saw her in the flesh and met anyone who was related to my mum. It was also the first time that I saw loads of Taiwanese people in one place, because I grew up under the assumption, because my mum interchangeably referred to herself as Chinese, Taiwanese, pretty much the same. I didn't realize how unique Taiwan is, and just how adorable Taiwanese people are. So that was what made me really fall in love with it, especially because that was kind of what made me understand my mum's personality a bit better. So that first trip was very much just realizing that there's this entire other side of myself that I haven't explored. Yeah.
Very cool. And tell me about Third Space International and the other stuff that you're working on now.
Yes. So because I come from I would say a modest background, because my mum raised me and my siblings alone in a foreign country. So we grew up without very many resources. And I actually applied for a bursary to go to boarding school in my attempt to run away and expand my horizons. And when I had the experience of, going from a very, very frugal upbringing to, one of the most well-resourced kind of school in the UK, I realized just how massive the discrepancy is for young people from my kind of background, second generation immigrant and working class or whatnot. I realized just how limiting that is when it comes to thinking about a future beyond survival, essentially. So I think this is another of the driving forces of why I wanted to go into international development. But it's very clear that the international development sector is dominated by, let's say, people not from this kind of background. So Third Space International has kind of been my attempt to, I suppose, investigate that that gap in accessibility for young people from perhaps less well-resourced backgrounds. And it links to my work now, which is I'm a program coordinator for an NGO consultancy. So learning more about the sector in my early career, but also trying to improve accessibility for it, because it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Being paid to travel and learn about other cultures and contexts and challenges, I think is really important, especially to bring back to the UK context. Yeah.
Oh, I guess this is why we're talking as well. There's lots of crossover there with the Space International, what you're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do with the departure board. So hopefully we can support you on that journey. So you're currently in Taipei, right?
I am.
And so tell me a little bit more about kind of what daily life is like for you at the moment, and both in terms of your work, like what you get up to outside of work. You said you just come back from a bouldering session, right? So in terms of like what there is to do in and around Taiwan, but also just kind of like paint us a picture maybe of what daily life looks like at the moment for you.
Yeah. So now so the purpose of me being in Taiwan right now is because I'm learning Chinese. I never learned it when I was younger. And the 2 times that I visited Taiwan previously, I've had to rely on Google Translate. So now I'm going to Mandarin class every day, Chinese Mandarin, learning how to write traditional characters, practicing speaking. So that currently takes up the majority of my time. I don't know if you've tried learning Chinese before. I think you may or may not have an idea of how demanding of a language.
Yeah, I have. Like me and my wife had very different approaches, and she was very good at reading, writing. Her vocabulary was far bigger than mine, whereas I was kind of in the office having to call Chinese companies every day, and so I learned by being a parrot and kind of repeating back, and so my grounding in the language wasn't good, and that was very limiting. But I could kind of get by fairly comfortably. But what I'm interested to ask you about, Rebecca, is like when I was running programs in China, we met a lot of university students who were ethnically Chinese or had a parent who was from China or Taiwan, Hong Kong, and those students wanted to go and kind of discover the kind of the land of their parents almost on their own terms, and somewhere where their extended family wasn't, perhaps, and going to a different place, but also learning Chinese in some cases from scratch. So what's that been like for you as somebody who's got a Taiwanese parent? So you've got that kind of rooting in Taiwan, but having to then go and learn Chinese. And what stage are you at now, and how was that initially? And what's Taiwan like as a place to go and do that?
Yeah, so it's I will say straight off the bat that it's not been easy, because as the assumptions go, Chinese is a very hard language, and I also started from scratch, pretty much from scratch. So it's been a lot to kind of go from, having set myself and my life, my future, my community and networks up in the UK, going from that to being functionally illiterate, unable to do any bureaucracy myself, even struggling to order breakfast. I spent a long time in that space of really, really being a foreigner. But in a way, it was humbling because, my mum went to the UK as a complete foreigner, and she was going through that same process of learning a completely different culture and, building her independence outside of the context of everything that she knew. I think I learned a lot from that experience of being a foreigner for the first time in my life. But now, I'm the class that I am currently in is veered towards other people on this similar journey. A lot of them have grown up speaking some Chinese, or they can kind of get by conversationally, but they can't read or write because they, maybe they grew up in the US, or they have a fairly loose relationship with either Taiwan or in some cases China. So I'm now at the point where I can really feel the progress I'm making in terms of, I can now have full-blown conversations. I can now connect with people without relying on my phone, which means, to link back to your question about daily life here, it just makes everything so much smoother. It makes me realize that actually the struggle of being here when I was an exchange student 2 years ago, a lot of that came from, language barriers or simply the pain of settling that happens, for most people. So yeah, it's just been really revelationary, I think, understanding what kind of life, or I could say quality of life, is possible, having come from the UK, where I love my country, but also, I think we all know it's going in a challenging direction, especially for my generation. It does feel bleak sometimes, working 4 jobs to stay afloat during my full-time studies. I think for me, I thought that was just the normal, but coming here, I realized it's kind of, it's got a dual or triple purpose of learning Chinese, enjoying a better quality of life, but also connecting with my roots, I can say.
We're going to dig into that a bit further because I want to ask you about language skills and learning Chinese as well. But there feels like there's something to dig into there about reflecting on like the UK whilst spending an extended period of time somewhere else, which for you is Taiwan. Like, how else has it forced you to kind of reflect and on your like previous experience in the UK? And if you were talking to somebody who's listening to this who is a current university student, for example, like who maybe hasn't gone and spent that extended period overseas yet, like what would you say to them in terms of the reflections that it's given
you? I think I can say this about travel in general, and having, any level of multicultural exposure, is that you're understanding that other versions of the world or of reality are possible. And I think especially the kind of the world I came from was one where a lot of the time we couldn't see the the prospect of even leaving our council estate, or going to college, let alone university. So going from that view of the world where it was very much, I understand my place, it's to stay here and it's to do what everyone around me does, versus, when I think, because Leicester really exposed me to the fact that a world beyond exists. I was very lucky in that sense, and always had the curiosity to find out more about, I suppose how other corners of this vast planet, how they function, and what ways are they doing better, and what ways are they perhaps not. A lot of this is the question of international development, and yeah, so I think that's
I think
that. So
what you've done kind of and described in two key periods of your life, but I guess you've probably done it at all sorts of stages, is you've kind of really driven yourself to take yourself out of a situation and put yourself in a new one, put yourself way out of your comfort zone, but with trying to develop yourself and see something more in mind. And I don't imagine that's going to stop for you. So what's next, I guess? Where do you think the next horizon is that you're going to try and like push towards, or what's the thing that, or are you're like far enough out of your comfort zone trying to learn and master Chinese, um, and live and work in Taiwan that you haven't thought about that yet? Or but what have you got any kind of idea of like what's the next thing that you want to kind of take yourself and push yourself out of your comfort zone?
I have too many ideas. I
Ah,
think
this is well, good. I want to hear them.
um, so currently my language program finishes in May. But also for very excitingly for my work, I have the opportunity to travel come June or so. So in the immediate future, I will be preparing to meet some of my partner organizations for work in Cambodia, Nepal, Thailand. That's going to be the Asia trip. So that's already, I think that's beyond my wildest imagination in terms of where I thought I could be in my early career. But also in terms of growth, as you say, I think Chinese is enough of a challenge for now, but I really, I do feel a responsibility to keep my relationship with the UK, because actually to be able to enjoy this, journey of exploration is incredible for me personally, but also I think unless I'm able to share my learnings, or at least, understand what the connection is between this life I'm living now and where I came from, I think that's kind of the next stage of my um, of my growth. I believe is trying to, keep my footing in the UK and bring back some of my learnings, because actually, you know, I don't know about you, but I never knew what it meant to live in a democracy until I lived in Taiwan. I never knew what it meant to have a functioning government, and to feel like the systems are working in favor of people as opposed to against. So all of these things, I think, in line with my aspiration to be in international development, I think a lot of that should be about bringing back ideas and perspectives to benefit, the society I know best, essentially. So yeah, I think the next challenge might be more homeward looking. I still refuse to spend winter in the UK.
Yeah, you're not missing much in that sense. We're just starting to come out the other side of that right now. So yeah. It's a very exciting journey, Rebecca. I'm like really looking forward to following it. I think some of the things that you've talked about are going to be really inspiring for people watching this and listening to it. And we'll link to your website in the comments too, so people can kind of follow your journey and connect with you as well. That's okay. Um, but yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. And I guess one thing to kind of finish us off with, I was thinking about Taiwan as a place to go and learn Chinese, as you've done in a couple of stints. And I guess, learning languages in school, there was some languages and places that you would go to practice that language where you felt like people would kind of roll their eyes and go, "Oh God, please stop crying! You're butchering my language, and let's speak English." And I guess for me, like the language that I learned was German, and I felt like there was quite a good balance of people kind of being quite supportive of the fact that you're learning the language and spending time in Germany, and but would also be quite harsh critics and set you right. So it was a good place to kind of to improve, but not be too demoralized all the time. On that scale of things, how does Taiwan sit as a place to kind of learn Chinese? Supportive, demoralizing scale of things.
So I come from the experience of having only learnt French, and as you may or may not know, French people are proud of their language, and French grammar is also very complex. And from my experience, French people aren't afraid to correct you, which personally I love because it means you improve quicker, but it can, as you say, be quite demoralizing. In Taiwan, I think the difference I've experienced is that generally Taiwanese people understand just how hard Chinese is, also because in Taiwan they use traditional characters as opposed to in China or Hong Kong where increasingly it's simplified. So actually there is usually a reaction when someone hears a very obvious foreigner speaking a sentence in Chinese. I think it's, it's received very, how do you say? There's a lot of surprise. I think there's a lot of surprise and also support, in my experience of learning so far, especially when I go further down south in the island. You find, of course, in the capital city, people are more fast-paced and have less time to walk you through the complexities of a language, right? But my experience, especially down in Taitung, which is in the east coast, it's just felt really, like I'm on this journey with these people who want to share this part of their culture, and the way they communicate. So yeah, it's been a really positive experience. It doesn't stop me from feeling stupid sometimes, and I still struggle to communicate with my amma, with my grandma, because she has a very strong Taiwanese accent. But overall, I believe it's a very, very solid place to start that journey because of the sheer kindness.
Great. Well, I like to round off an interview about a place with a resounding recommendation. So that's great. Good endorsement of Taiwan as a place. But thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us for the interview. We'll round it off there.
Jamie, lovely to chat.
Thank you.